Is liberty dying where you live? Escape to Keene at freekeene.com.
I think that's a factual issue, depending on how the facts play out, then you can argue how the facts apply. Okay.
State calls Carolyn Gillespie to the stand.
Before we start, I know Mr. Freeman, you're familiar with the court process, but these are, just to remind you, these are Class A misdemeanors. You had the opportunity to apply for counsel if you wanted to qualify, or you could hire somebody representing yourself and you feel comfortable doing that. I'm fine. Okay.
You remain standing and raise your right hand. You swear that the testimony about this matter be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Please have a seat. Can you state your name, spelling your last name for the record?
Carolyn Gillespie, Gillespie.
Ms. Gillespie, how are you employed?
I am a clerk at the Keene and Milford DMVs for the state of New Hampshire.
And how long have you been employed by the DMV?
4 years, 5 years.
I want to draw your attention back to November 8th, 2013. Were you working on that date?
Yes.
Which DMV were you working at? Keene and
I was at Keene.
Are you familiar with the defendant, Mr. Freeman?
I am.
And how are you familiar with the defendant?
He's a customer. I've seen him several times at the Keene DMV.
Okay. Now, that specific date on November 8, 2013, did you have a chance to come in contact with the defendant?
Yes.
How did you come in contact with the defendant on that day?
I came in to get a New Hampshire driver's license.
Now, this individual, I've identified the defendant and Mr. Freeman. Can you just identify for the court if he's in the courtroom today?
Yes.
Use an article of clothing that he's wearing, something like that.
Gentleman in the blue and red striped shirt sitting at the table.
The record reflect the witnesses identified the defendant. You would indicate Mr. Freeman came in to apply for a driver's license, is that correct?
Correct.
And did you have any discussion with him about that, applying for the driver's license?
Yes.
What was the nature of that discussion?
Well, on the particular day that we're talking about, I believe is the day I issued him a license.
Yes, that's correct.
Correct. So we had discussed the application, 2 forms of ID, the proof of residency, the eye test, all of his documents.
And did the defendant give you an application for a license?
Yes.
If I may approach you on. Let me approach you on. I'm just going to show you a 2-page document. If you could just identify what that document is.
Yes, it's an application for original driver's license.
Is that the one that was submitted to you or given to you on November 8, 2013?
Yes.
And what's the name on this application?
Ian Holt Bernard.
And was that the application that was given to you by the defendant?
Yes.
Right, that's been marked as State's Exhibit 1 into the evidence.
Any objection to that?
No objection.
Just 2 pages?
Yes, sure. I mean, you indicated you need other documents just besides the application, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Or was the defendant able to provide you with other documentation?
Yes.
Let me approach you on. I'm just going to show you 1-page document. You should just identify what that document is.
This is a birth certificate from the state of Florida.
And what's the name on that birth certificate?
Ian Holt Bernard.
And was that one of the documents given to you by the defendant on
Yes.
November 8th?
Yes.
Mark the State's Exhibit 2, Your Honor.
Any objection to that?
No objection.
Let me approach you, Your Honor.
Just a second. That's Exhibit 2, go ahead.
I'm going to show you another document. You just identify what that document is?
This is a Florida driver's license for Ian Holt Bernard.
Was that presented to you that day by the defendant?
Yes.
Marked at Mark States Exhibit 3.
Any objection to that?
No objection.
And that's Exhibit 3.
Let me approach you. Now, I have a 2-page document. Please identify what that document is.
This is proof of residency in the state of New Hampshire for Ian Holt Bernard.
Okay. Was that given to you by the defendant that day on November 8, 2013? Right after you marked the States Exhibit 4 entered headings.
Okay. Once again, any objection?
No objection.
And based upon this, these documents you were able, the defendant provided to you, what did you do next?
I issued him a New Hampshire driver's license.
During this interaction on November 8th, did the defendant have any discussions with you regarding the name Ian Freeman?
We either had that discussion that day or the previous time he came in with documents wanting a driver's license in the state of New Hampshire under the last name of Freeman as opposed to Bernard.
What was the nature of those discussions?
That he did not want to, I believe the first time I met him, he did not present his Florida license. We talked about full testing, had a world passport under the name of Freeman, and we discussed all of his options on what we would need. He also did not want to give out his social security number in order to get a driver's license. So we had those discussions, but on the day I issued his license, he held up all the proper documents to get a New Hampshire license.
Did you ever discuss with the defendant prior to the November 8th date or on that November 8th date the probate process and how he could?
Yes, if he was going to change his name and get a license issued legally in New Hampshire, if he wanted it under Freeman, his only choice was to go to probate court and get his name changed so that he could use the name that he preferred if he did not want to use the birth name.
At any point during your discussions, either prior to that date or on November 8th, 2013, when the application was being submitted, did the defendant ever indicate to you that his name had been legally changed to Ian Freeman?
I don't believe so.
Did he provide you with any documents indicating that his name had been legally changed to Ian Freeman?
I don't believe so.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. If you have any questions, you can stand up and ask them now.
Stand by 1 moment, please. Take a few notes. Can I call you Carolyn?
Mm-hmm.
I just spelled Carolyn, but I-N or Y?
Y-N.
Carolyn, you didn't sound real sure on the last couple of questions that this gentleman had inquired of you. Specifically, you weren't sure if I provided you documentation from, for instance, probate court about a name change previously?
Right. We had talked about the name changes, and I had seen a lot of documents from you, so I can't say when I saw what documents or what documents I saw.
I know it was a long time ago at this point. We're talking about November of 2013. Now, you did mention that I came in and got the license under the name Ian Holt Bernard on November 8th. Do you recall me coming in on November 7th?
I do not, but I had talked to you multiple times, I believe, before.
Were you working on November 7th?
I don't know. I would have to check the files.
Is it possible that I did come in on November 7th with a document from probate court?
Yes, because we had talked about you having going to probate court. So that is entirely possible that you came in with a document before or after November 7th?
Now, I have to apologize. I don't recall specifically whether I was dealing with you on November 7th or the other lady who was in there, or maybe both of you at once. But regardless, on November 7th, do you recall that, or is it possible that I came in, showed you that document, and then you told me that I would need to get a document from the Social Security office in order to acquire the license?
I would have told you that you would have to change Social Security. If you did a probate name change, you would have to do Social Security for our system to match the two names together, and that you would have to wait until overnight before you could come back in and that name change would be done. So yes, in fact, I would have told you that.
Mm-hmm. Now, you recall that you mentioned earlier in your testimony that that I mentioned something about the Social Security number, not wanting to get that out or not having it, something like that.
I may have called Concord on that.
So would that indicate to you that that I might have an objection to the whole Social Security process?
Yeah.
So you recall me telling you that I would have to think about it and then come back later and figure out what to do because I didn't want to deal with Social Security?
I don't recall you saying you didn't want to deal with Social Security, but I can imagine that would be the whole process, because I'm not sure you also wanted to turn in the Florida license. Because I believe the first time you came, you did not bring that, and we had talked about you going into testing. But because it is so long ago, you know, those are not the pieces that I can actually say happened or didn't happen.
So, it's pretty clear that I did come in on at least 2 separate occasions with 2 different names.
Yes, absolutely.
And were you aware that in order to, if I had the, so just to be clear, if I brought in the probate court paperwork for Ian Freeman, you would have told me, oh, you need to have this stuff from Social Security, some sort of paperwork from Social Security. Then I discovered in my research, and please confirm with me if you agree.
Yeah, I want you to be careful here, because you're sort of mingling some testimony in with your questions. I have to ignore anything that's testimonial. I can't take that as fact.
I understand how I have to testify.
Well, it's up to you what you want to do, but you're kind of embedding a testimony in your question. Just do it a little carefully.
I appreciate that. So what I learned, and please agree or disagree with this assessment, is that if I were to get the license in my given name, Ian Bernard, that I wouldn't need that Social Security paperwork. Is that true?
No, you would present you would have a valid Social Security number under your Bernard name.
So therefore,
You would provide me with the 2 forms of ID, one of which would not have to be Social Security if you were not changing the name. Is that the question?
correct. So I wouldn't need whatever that paper was from Social Security in order to get the license under my given name.
Under Bernard. Because that would already be where your Social Security number lived, is under Bernard.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
If I get what you're asking.
You do.
Okay.
Now, at any point, did you inform me on November 8th when I came in with the license? Did you inform me that using my birth name would be illegal?
If you had a probate name change, you have 10 days to get your names switched over, all your legal documents done according to the probate paper, is what I would have told you. That
Yeah.
you would have 10 days to legally change that name.
But did you inform me that using my birth name to get the license would be illegal? That's what I'm accused of here today in court.
No, I don't think I would have had reason to say that.
Did you know that that using a birth name on a license application after getting a name change through probate is allegedly illegal?
Well, I don't know that, but I would imagine once you legally change your name and you have 10 days to change it, then it would be, right?
Well, that's what they're alleging. I don't know.
I mean, if you have 10 days to legally change it, I'm guessing that you need to do that.
Given that you knew that I was using my birth name and not some other made-up name for the application for the license, did you feel that I was doing it for a fraudulent, criminal, or wrongful purpose?
No?
Did you report anything suspicious about the transaction that day?
Not that day.
Did you report some? When I say that day, I mean about that transaction. Did you?
That particular transaction, no, I don't believe so.
Did you report something suspicious about a different transaction at some point with me?
No, but you had come in after the fact trying to get voter ID cards under another name. So, I mean, I know that you have been in there multiple times on either name. The dates and times, I could not give you, but yes, I know you have the two names you were working with.
Regardless, on the day in question, it didn't seem like I was there for any sort of criminal purpose.
I had 2 forms of ID and proof of residency to issue you a New Hampshire license.
So I noticed you called me a customer earlier. Is that typically how the DMV refers to clients?
Clients, customers,
Now,
they're
normally,
providing a service.
yeah, I've been involved in providing services before, and I'm certainly familiar with that. Do you think it's good customer service to handcuff and arrest a customer who made a mistake and was allowed to make that mistake by one of the customer service reps?
Objection, Your Honor, also speculation involved that's
Sustained.
I'd like to object to that. It doesn't call for speculation, it's just an opinion.
It's not relevant. It's sustained.
I have no further questions. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any redirect?
I knew you were script. So, ma'am, you indicated that defendant came back sometime to get a voter ID card, correct?
Yes.
And what name did he attempt to get a voter ID card?
Objection, relevance. The trial here is to determine whether or not certain laws were broken at the time of the application for a driver's license.
Or he goes through the defendant's knowing crime. He brought up this on his cross-examination.
Well, you did bring it up yourself, and it does go to intent.
What name did the defendant use on when he tried to get a voter ID card?
I don't remember.
Why wouldn't it, what would the red flag have been? Why wouldn't you have issued him a voter ID card?
When you have a driver's license in the state of New Hampshire or a non-driver ID that is valid, you do not get the voter ID card that a town clerk sends you over with a little form to get for those people who don't have the other IDs so they can vote in the town in which they live. You can't, if you have a valid license, also have a valid non-voter ID card.
So since you had, on November 8th, had issued the driver's license, you couldn't issue a voter ID card under any name?
Correct. When I saw him, I said, you can't have that because you already have this driver's license.
Which license is it?
I believe it would have been the driver's license I issued on the day.
On the 8th?
Yeah, I would think. I mean, I can't swear to that, but I would believe that he had that driver's license at that time.
And then just to follow up, on the application, is a social security number required for a first license?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. So on that
Social
application,
Security card or Social Security?
Social Security number, let me rephrase. Is Social Security number required for this application?
Correct.
So on that application, there is a Social Security number attached to this defendant, right?
Yes.
I have no further questions around this one.
Mr. Freeman?
Are you familiar with the Supreme Court case Moskowitz versus Moskowitz?
Of course not.
Let's see. May I approach the witness?
For what purpose?
Actually, I guess I've got evidence, or what do you call it, court spacing.
Exhibit?
Exhibit, thank you.
What is it?
This is actually from a notice of name change that I submitted to this court back in 2010. It cites Supreme Court case Moskowitz versus Moskowitz.
Is that part of your legal argument?
This is part of this discovery.
I mean, what light can this witness shed on that case? Is that
It's in reference to the questioning about the licenses.
I guess what I'm asking is what question are you going to ask this witness with respect to that purported exhibit?
My intention is to ask her about the fact that I was registered to vote under the name Ian Freeman, and
How would she know that?
well, she wouldn't know that, but that would be the reason. That would be the reason I had been seeking to get the voter ID card under the name Ian Freeman.
Well, I guess I'll give you some latitude, let you ask the question. I don't know that this witness is the proper witness to ask this question. Well, make sure you speak up and just.
So yeah, just going to point out to her what is.
You have an extra copy of that?
Yes, I do actually.
Why don't you leave that with her and go back and there.
So,
Just for me.
can you just read that quote for me, Carolyn?
You what?
Can you read the quote from Moskowitz versus Moskowitz, the bold quote there? Yeah.
One,
I guess an objection. I'm not sure how this witness says. She hasn't identified the document as having any knowledge of this document. So reading something from it is a proper foundation.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. You can make your argument with respect to the name change and that to the court, or you call a witness or testify. That's up to you. This witness has no expertise with respect to interpreting Supreme Court law. Just read. I mean, you're asking her to read it. You might as well ask me to read it.
If you'd like to read it into the record, I'm fine. Anybody else?
Well, you can read it into the record when you make your argument. That's certainly acceptable. Yeah, we're familiar. This has come up with that. Have a seat, please. Have a seat, please.
Would you mind reading?
Yes, I would. At this stage, I would. It's not my job to read, to introduce evidence here, to make the arguments.
Well, so just to summarize, Moskowitz versus Moskowitz says one may lawfully change his name at will without resort to any legal proceedings if the change is not made for fraudulent, criminal, or wrongful purpose. Were you aware when I came in for the voter ID that I had registered to vote previously, like years previously, under the name Ian Freeman?
I would have no way to know that.
Did you know it was completely legal for me to do that at that time, even though my name was legally my given name of Ian Bernard?
Objection, Your Honor. She's indicated she doesn't know it anyway,
Just
so I
name.
don't know how she could.
You're calling for a legal conclusion there. It's not acceptable.
Do you, from your perspective, was it suspicious that I had come in, asked for a voter ID under a different name?
Was it suspicious? Not necessarily suspicious, it just wasn't something that could be done.
And did I have the appropriate paperwork from the clerk of court in Keene, the yellow sheet of paper?
You had a piece of paper from the town clerk, absolutely, you did.
That would indicate that on the roll.
The town clerk, had no problem providing you with that document.
So it could just be that I didn't realize that the state wouldn't issue me that second ID under that name.
All things are possible.
Okay, so just to reiterate, on the day in question, the November 8th, you didn't feel like I was doing anything for a fraudulent, criminal, or wrongful purpose?
You had the proper documents to get a New Hampshire driver's license, which I issued.
Thanks, Carolyn. Appreciate that.
Okay, anything else?
No further questions, sir.
Okay, can this witness be excused?
Witness is charged.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we need to stick around, or could you go back to work?
I would need to stick around now, so.
Go.
What's that? Okay.
Thank you.
Right.
State Law Sergeant Andrew Player to the stand. Raise your right hand. You swear that the testimony about this matter, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please have a seat. Will you state your name and spell your last name for the record?
My name is Andrew Player. My last name is spelled P-L-A-Y-E-R.
Sir, how are you employed?
I'm currently employed with the Department of Safety Division of State Police. I've been so employed since December of 1998. Prior to that, I actually worked for the town of Enfield, where I served as both a part-time and a full-time police officer. I was employed by the town of Enfield for approximately 2.5 years. My current assignment with State Police is I'm a detective sergeant. at Troop G. I oversee the fraud investigations at the Department of Motor Vehicles.
How long have you been assigned as Detective Sergeant at Troop G?
I've been so assigned since June of, let's see, it's been approximately almost 2.5 years now. So June of 2012.
You're a certified police officer in the state of New Hampshire?
I am. I graduated from the 117th Police Academy.
I want to draw your attention to February 2014. Were you given an investigation, assigned an investigation regarding Ian Freeman, aka Ian Bernard?
Yes, I happen to speak to Jeff Oberdink, who is the supervisor of licensing for the Department of Motor Vehicles. He had a conversation with me about a gentleman that had 2 transactions with the Department of Motor Vehicles. One was for a driver's license, and the other was for a voter identification card. The pictures appeared to be the same individual. In fact, the gentleman looked like he was quite possibly wearing the same shirt. And the thing that I did notice was there was 2 different names. The voter ID card was under the name Ian Freeman, and the driver's license was under the name Ian Bernard.
Based upon that information, what did you do next?
I ultimately wound up running a check of the records, the scanned documents that the Department of Motor Vehicle had retained as part of their files. I was able to determine that that it did appear to be the same individual. The addresses, I believe, appeared to be the same 73 Everett Street, I believe it is, in Keene, was for the same individual. The documents, the signatures looked similar the documents looked consistent to be that they were the same person. Ultimately, what I wound up doing was I wound up having a conversation with Ian Freeman, that's now his legal name, who's also known as Ian Bernard.
And is that person in the courtroom here today?
Yes, he is. You see that at the defense table in the blue and red striped shirt with the goatee and the brown hair.
The record reflects the troopers identified.
Yes, I will.
What was the nature of that conversation you had with the defendant?
I ultimately went to his house with Trooper Jeff Ardini. I knocked on the door. Initially, I was at the wrong side of the house. They directed me to the side he was in. When he exited the house, I noticed he had a video camera in his hands, and I informed him that I was investigating why he had been denied a voter identification card in February. I said specifically February, but I told him that I was investigating why he had been denied a voter identification card, and I asked if he would speak to me about that. He asked if I would do so on the record, and I informed him that I was fine with that. I actually asked him if I could record our conversation as well, which Mr. Freeman agreed to. During the conversation, I ultimately talked to him about the voter ID card. He told me that he had, I believe that he told me he had tried to attempt to obtain a voter ID card in late January. I asked if he had gone anywhere else to do that. He informed me that he had not. Between the time that I was initially received the case and the time that I spoke to Mr. Freeman, I had been advised by Mr. Oberdink that Mr. Freeman had gone to Nashville in order to try to obtain a voter identification card.
Had gone where?
To Nashville, the Department of Motor Vehicles in Nashville, in order to obtain a voter identification card under the Freeman name. He was denied, was turned away from getting that voter ID card. Mr. Freeman stated that he had not gone anywhere else other than Keene DMV in order to get the voter ID card. I asked him if he had legally changed his name, and he stated that he had. I asked him if he had changed his name with the Department of Motor Vehicles, and he informed me that he had an intention to change his name, but he did not feel that he had an obligation to change his name. Prior to actually speaking to Mr. Freeman, I had come here to the Keene Court and received a copy of his the probate decision where he had changed his name.
Great stuff, sir.
Yeah.
Let me approach you.
Yep.
I'm going to show you a 4-page document. You just go through and just identify what those 4 pages are.
The top document is a notice of hearing dated November 7th, 2013 at 11:10 a.m. It was matters to be considered was a petition for a change of name, and the case name was for a name change of Ian Holt Bernard. The second document is a certificate of name change. The name change of Ian Holt Bernard. On November 7, 2013, the name of Ian Holt Bernard, born August 2, 1980, in Sarasota, Florida, was changed to Ian B. Freeman. That document was dated November 7, 2013. The third document is also from the 8th Circuit Probate Division, Key Court, for the name change of Ian Holt Bernard. Lists his name as, petitioner name is Ian Holt Bernard, 73 Leverett Street. His date of birth of August 2nd, 1980. And then the third document is where he actually, petitioner requests that the name Ian Holt Bernard be changed to Ian B. Freeman. And it looks like that was actually dated October 8th, 2013. And it was granted by Justice McLeod of the New Hampshire Circuit Court on November 7th, 2013.
I'd ask that these 4 pages be in the state's exhibit 5, I believe.
Any objection?
No.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to letter these A, B, C, and D, okay, so in case they're being discussed individually, in the same order that they were discussed from the witness here.
Thank you.
And it looks like it's 34, 35, 36, and 37 from discovery. Was those discovery numbers at the bottom?
Those are discovery numbers as well, correct?
Okay, so it's 5, A, B, C, and D.
Sergeant Clay, I just wanted to give back a little. Do you remember exactly or a short time frame when you actually had this conversation with the defendant you spoke about a little bit earlier?
Yes, I believe that was on March 19th, 2015, I believe.
I'm sorry, what was happening then? March 19th was what?
March 19th was the day that I actually went and spoke to Mr. Freeman at his residence.
The discussion you talked about before.
Correct.
2014?
Yes, I apologize, 2014.
And at that point, I just want to make sure the testimony is clear. On that point, the defendant indicated to you that he still hadn't changed his name in the Department of Motor Vehicles, correct?
That is correct. On March 19th, 2014, Mr. Freeman told me that he believed he had an intention to change his name on his New Hampshire driver's license, but he did not feel that he had an obligation to change his name. I did inform him of the New Hampshire statutes that require him to do that, and I was subsequently able to find what the actual RSAs for that.
What did you do next after you spoke with the defendant on that date?
I actually ultimately wanted to go back to Troop C in Keene. Troop C shares a building with the Department of Motor Vehicles. While I was there, I was ultimately notified that Mr. Freeman was next door at the Department of Motor Vehicles changing his name on his driver's license from Ian Bernard to Ian Freeman.
What happened next after?
After Mr. Freeman finished his transaction, he left the Department of Motor Vehicles. I was actually just around the corner where he could not see me, but I was able to monitor the transaction. After he got done, he left the Department of Motor Vehicles, and within a very brief amount of time, just a few minutes, Mr. Freeman came to the Troop C, where I had a brief conversation with him in the lobby.
What was the nature of that conversation?
I believe it was at that point that he told me that he had misrecollected about going to any other Department of Motor Vehicles in order to obtain the voter identification card. I believe it was at that time that he told me that he had actually gone to Nashville in order to try to get the voter ID card. I also informed him that I forgot to get a phone number from him previously, asked if there was a number that he'd be willing to provide.
What did you do next?
When I got the phone number from him, I gave him the phone number so he could contact me. That concluded my conversations with Mr. Freeman on that particular day. As part of the investigation, I ultimately wound up speaking to Sergeant Short from the Keene Police Department. I also wound up pulling documents from the Florida Department of Motor Vehicles in reference to Mr. Freeman's registrations and titles for vehicles that he had registered title in the state of Florida. I learned that he had I ultimately learned that the day after I went and spoke to him and he legally changed his New Hampshire driver's license, I should say, I learned that after speaking to him on March 19th, 2014, that on March 20th, 2014, Mr. Freeman obtained a new driver's license, or excuse me, a replacement driver's license from the state of Florida under the name Ian Bernard.
Okay, Coach John? Sergeant Clay, I'm going to show you a ID card which is identified what that ID card is?
This is a Florida driver's license with the name Ian Holt Bernard. It says it was replaced March 20th, 2014. This is the Florida driver's license that I obtained from Mr. Freeman.
Much what?
It was, the replace date is March 20th, 2014.
No, it has to be marked as State's Exhibit 6.
Any objection?
No objection.
Now, Sergeant Player, you would indicate you received some documents from the state of Florida. What name, if any, was used by the defendant in the state of Florida?
On all the documents listed with the state of Florida, Mr. Freeman had used the name Ian Bernard. And those documents span from, I want to say from like 2006 until, I don't remember, well, until the March 20th, 2014.
What did you do next as part of your investigation?
I ultimately, I had contact with the former residence where he had lived at. I learned that he had, again, did not actually live at the residence that he provided in the state of Florida.
Objection, relevance, does that have anything to do with the charges?
I think it goes towards the intent. He's obviously using multiple names in multiple states. Goes to, I think he's part of the issue.
I think it's relevant.
I also was able to give copies of his voter identification records from the city of Keene. I noticed that on those documents, he had actually used the name Ian Freeman. Ian Freeman on all of his voter documents. And those dated, again, I want to say from like 2006 until, I think the last one was November 5th, 2013.
What's the next step you took as part of your investigation?
I ultimately wound up doing a arrest warrant for Mr. Freeman after reviewing all the documents and the facts regarding the case. I also had a conversation with Ms. Gillespie, where I obtained a statement from her. Upon reviewing all that information, I ultimately completed an arrest warrant for Mr. Freeman.
What did you do next once you had completed the arrest warrant?
I ultimately contacted Mr. Freeman. I told him that I would be in the city of Keene on that upcoming Friday, that I was looking to try and meet up with him. I had some follow-up questions regarding the transaction and asked if he would be free to meet. Actually, I believe I contacted him prior to having the arrest warrant signed, but ultimately I did have a conversation with him and asked if I could meet up with him. Mr. Freeman actually invited me to meet with him at his residence.
Do you remember when this was?
It was in April. I think it was April 19th, but I don't remember the date specifically. If I review my report, I probably remember the date.
April 2014?
Yes.
That time frame? Did you eventually talk with the defendant in April 2014?
I did. I had a conversation with him. I asked to meet him. He did not want to meet at Troop C. He said it was kind of dark and dingy. He ultimately invited me to meet him at his residence, which I did myself, and Trooper Jason Hickox went to his residence. When we parked in the yard, I got out of my police car. He immediately told me he saw you were videotaping me. I had no issues with that. I was asked to move my cruiser because it was blocking, I guess, a couple of parking spaces, so I complied with their request and did that. I then went up on the porch. Mr. Freeman, I believe, offered me a seat on the porch, but I told him I would stand. And I asked him, he actually told me that he wanted to talk with me that particular day about the transaction. He felt that the whole situation was kind of confusing. I did talk to him about the driver ID. He did ultimately tell me something to the effect that he had attempted to obtain the voter ID after he legally changed his name, and that he had obtained a driver's license under the Ian Bernard name after legally changing his name to Ian Freeman. He indicated that it was easier at that point in order to do that. I subsequently learned through postings on freekeen.com that Mr. Freeman had been suspended by the Department of Motor Vehicles for failing to become a New Hampshire resident, to obtain a New Hampshire license as a New Hampshire resident, and that his driver's license was going to be suspended. However, if he renewed that license, that within a certain time frame, he would not be subject to a reinstatement fee. The time frame that he ultimately obtained that New Hampshire license was within that period where he did not have to pay a reinstatement fee.
Based on that, what we just talked about now, if the defendant was not able in that time frame to get a proper license under his new name, what would have happened?
He would have had to pay a reinstatement fee to the Department of Motor Vehicles, which I believe would have been, I think it's $100.
Do you have any other further discussion with the defendant on that tape?
I did. I asked him about the Florida driver's license that he obtained, or that was obtained. Mr. Freeman indicated that he wasn't. Mr. Freeman did not admit to having a Florida driver's license. I did note that while I was talking to him, his hands immediately began to tremble, and the camera that he was holding in his hands began to shake. I took that as a sign of nervousness. Ultimately, I told Mr. Freeman that what he had done was a violation of the law, as he had used a false name in order to obtain his driver's license. The Department of Safety rules and regulations require that you do use your legal name when obtaining a New Hampshire driver's license. And since he had not done that, he had subsequently violated the statute providing false information on that application. At that point, I then told him that I had a warrant for his arrest and subsequently arrested him.
What should you do next after you arrest the defendant?
I handcuffed him. Actually, he had handed off his wallet and his video camera. At that point, I was able to place handcuffs on him. I searched him, placed him in the front seat of my police car, and myself and Trooper Cox escorted him back to Troop C for processing. Once there, I read him his Miranda rights, which he chose to invoke. He was afforded the opportunity to have a bail commissioner. The bail commissioner ultimately set bail for Mr. Freeman, and that ultimately concluded my contact with him on that particular day. I did have contact with him later on.
Now, the license is marked as State's Exhibit 6. Did Mr. Freeman turn that over that date to you?
No, he did not.
Now, when you attempted to arrest the defendant, you had indicated you got rid of some items before you placed him under arrest. Can you just state what again you got rid of?
As soon as I told him that the warrant for his arrest, he removed his wallet and handed off to a gentleman. I believe it was a gentleman on the porch. There were several people on the porch. I don't remember specifically who he handed off, but the first thing that he got rid of was his camera and his license. I don't remember which order, but he quickly got rid of those.
Objection, you said license, not wallet?
Oh, I apologize. I meant to say get rid of his wallet and his video camera.
And why did that draw your attention that he immediately handed off his wallet to somebody else?
I knew, at that point, I knew that he had obtained the Florida license after changing his name on his New Hampshire license. Most people typically keep their driver's licenses in their wallet. It was my belief that there was likely a Florida license in that wallet.
Now, you said you had contact with the defendant after that date that he was arrested, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, what was the nature of that contact?
On his arraignment date here at the Keene District Court, I had contact with the state of Florida about his Florida driver's license. I was able to provide them information about his name change and was able to inform them that he had committed a fraud upon the Florida Department of Motor Vehicles by providing false information. Florida ultimately rescinded that driver's license. So at that point, under the prohibition statute, I was authorized in order to retrieve that license from him. That was my purpose of coming to the court that particular day. I asked Mr. Freeman if we could talk in a conference room. We went across the hall. Mr. Freeman asked if we could videotape, which I said that was fine. And I asked him about the Florida driver's license. He initially denied it, and then I asked him for his wallet. Mr. Freeman asked if that was an order or a request. I told him that it was an order. He asked if I had a search warrant. I told him that I would be applying for one. And at that point, I removed a evidence bag out of my pocket and placed it on the table. I told Mr. Freeman that I would allow him to initial the signature, made him feel more comfortable that we weren't tampering with the evidence. And at that point, Mr. Freeman voluntarily offered to let me search his wallet for the Florida driver's license if it was being processed along. I told him that I did not have a consent search form because I was not expecting him to grant voluntary consent to me for a search. He stated that the conversation was on the record and that he would admit on the record that he wasn't consenting to the search of his wallet. I searched the wallet, there was some money in there, but there was no Florida driver's license. At that point, I told Mr. Freeman that I still needed the Florida license and asked if it was back at his house. He was non-committal in his answer, but he stated that he could get it. We eventually kind of got in a position where neither one of us, Mr. Freeman was required to be here in court, so he wasn't able to immediately provide it, and I wanted to give Mr. Freeman at least a proper, I wanted to try and give Mr. Freeman a reasonable amount of time in order to provide that license. I told him that once he completed his arraignment that I would like for him to turn that driver's license over to me at the Troop C barracks within 1 hour. I informed him that I did not receive it from him within 1 hour, that I would be seeking a search warrant for his residence.
And was the license eventually turned over to you?
He was at Troop C within 30 minutes and was able to provide the Florida driver's license that is marked as evidence.
Did that end your contact with the defendant?
Yes.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, any questions for this witness?
Yeah, quite a few. Can I call you Andrew?
Sure.
Andrew, you said that you investigate fraud for the state police. Can you tell me a little bit more about some of the things you tend to do or some of the cases that tend to come across your desk?
We deal with identity fraud, residency fraud, title fraud, odometer tampering, as well as odometer fraud. We deal with people that are using false names, that provide false information in order to obtain driver's license. We do deal particularly with a fair amount of people that are in the country illegally trying to get that kind of information to obtain driver's license as well.
In some of the cases you investigate, are there frequently victims who are complaining about being defrauded?
Yes, typically as far as the title fraud, and we get victims that have made a complaint to the Department of Motor Vehicles that someone has perhaps forged their name on a bill of sale or on a title application. The odometer tampering people have come in and they state that they bought a vehicle that was indicated that it had lower miles than it actually did. So yes.
Would you say that in those individual cases that you've got someone who is attempting to use another name to secure some sort of pecuniary financial benefit to themselves?
In some cases, yes, but not in all cases.
Just curious, had I not applied for that voter ID that you talked about earlier, do you think this case ever would have been brought to your attention?
I honestly don't know.
Was it, you said that it was one of the Department of Motor Vehicles folks who brought this to your attention. Was there anyone else involved with the state police encouraging you to move forward with this?
No, I discussed it with the other troopers in my office that I oversee, but...
So this was on your own volition?
It was at the request of the Department of Motor Vehicles. Troop G actually services the Department of Motor Vehicles as far as any police action. We have troopers that deal with the inspection rules, the dealership rules. Part of Troop G's mission is to act on behalf of the Department of Motor Vehicles, and that's specifically what my group is designed to do.
When I spoke with you initially at the House, did it seem like to you that I had a genuine interest in making sure that the voter ID situation was being handled appropriately by the Department of Motor Vehicles?
Yes, it did.
Had I not spoken to you on any instance on both of your visits to the House, do you think you would have arrested me?
I believe I probably would have.
You mentioned the Florida identification earlier. Did you know that I had a plane flight scheduled in April under the name Ian?
Sorry, you had what?
The Florida identification that he was talking about
You
earlier.
had something scheduled.
My question was, did you know that I had a plane flight scheduled in April under the name Ian?
When I met you here at the court, I believe that you did tell me that you had a flight in Florida, that you had purchased that airline ticket under the name Ian Bernard, and were concerned about the screeners not being able to match up your name with the driver's license. And you said it was more convenient in order to get the Florida driver's license than it was more convenient to get the Florida license. You did not indicate that it would probably have been more convenient to probably contact the airline and let them know that you legally changed your name.
Is it possible I didn't know about that process?
It's possible you didn't know, but I think it would seem pretty likely that a reasonable thing to do would be to contact the airline.
But would you say it is
a false name in another state after you already have a license in New Hampshire?
Would say though it's possible that I used the given name in that case for expediency's sake rather than.
You indicated that you did it for expediency's sake.
At any point in your investigation, did anyone claim that you talked to that I've used either name in an attempt to defraud anyone?
Well, I would say during the course of my investigation that you did, because you used the Ian Bernard name to get the driver's license to avoid paying a $100 reinstatement fee because you didn't want to go to the Social Security office.
Objection. That didn't, I'd like to strike that because it didn't answer my question. My question was, did anyone claim, to whom you spoke, did anyone claim that I've used either name in an attempt to defraud them?
Your answer was not responsive, so just answer that question, but you can explain any answer.
Okay. No, nobody did, but based upon my investigation, like I say, I learned that you were subject to a $100 reinstatement fee, and based upon your information that you provided to me, as far as it was easier to get the name changed, and you lack of interest in working with the Social Security agency to fix it, I would say that yes, you were doing that to avoid paying the Department of Labor's $100.
Is there a victim in this case?
I'm sorry.
Is there a victim in this case?
State of New Hampshire.
What is the state?
The state of New Hampshire is the boundaries defined by the, it's the boundaries that are defined as the, where we reside at here in New Hampshire.
So are you saying I victimized boundaries?
You victimize the people of New Hampshire, the state of New Hampshire.
So even though no one was complaining to you about being victimized, it's your position that the people, all of them, are the victim.
Well, Supervisor Oberday complained to me about the driver's license issue.
But he didn't claim that he was damaged personally.
He didn't claim he was damaged personally, but one can certainly argue that the amount of time that was taken to investigate this case because of your actions, those tax dollars probably could have been spent on something else if you had not committed these actions.
Were you ever made aware that I'm a top radio personality?
Yes.
How'd you find that out?
I know that you mentioned that. In fact, it was on your business card when you gave it to me, the United Troop C, for the phone number that you provided.
Are you aware that it's common for media personalities to use names not given to them at birth?
Yes.
Is the use of two names, just on its own, evidence of criminal activity?
The use of two names? The use of two names? No, it's not.
Your report indicates in several places, I read it as part of discovery, that I have used two names for various things over several years. You've indicated that you've done some research in Florida, looking at titles on cars, and also looking at the clerk of court, the city clerk in their voter records. So you had seen that I had used two names over the years. Did you know that in New Hampshire it's legal to use any name that you choose so long as it's not for a fraudulent criminal purpose?
If you're referring to the Moskowitz v. Moskowitz decision, I am aware of that decision.
So just to clarify, you are aware that it's legal to use any name you choose so long as it's not for criminal or fraudulent purposes?
Yes.
If you believe that it were legal to use a chosen name in addition to your birth name, then neither of those names would be false to you, correct?
I apologize, what's the question?
So if you believe that it were legal, as I do, that to use a chosen name in addition to your birth name, so to use two names, then neither of those names would be false to you.
Well, it depends on how you're using the names. It depends on the situation, such as the New Hampshire driver's license application. The Department of Safety rules require that you use your legal name. So if you use a name that is not your legal name, then that would be illegal.
Is it possible? I didn't know that.
I'm pretty certain that ignorance of the law is not justification of violating the law. But it is possible.
It is possible. Is it possible that my long-time use of both my birth and chosen names was not done for fraudulent, criminal, or wrongful purpose?
I would argue that it was. In fact, I ultimately forwarded over the use of the Ian Freeman name on the voter applications, the affidavits, to the State Department's Attorney General's office for review for voter fraud.
Do you know if they've moved forward on that?
I do not know.
So you didn't really answer the question. Is it possible that long-time use of both names was not done for fraudulent, criminal, or wrongful purpose?
I think I did answer that. I stated that I believe that it was.
You believe that it was, but is it possible that it wasn't?
It's possible it wasn't, but I believe that it was.
Okay, I have another exhibit here.
Well, why don't you tell me what it is first?
This is from the New Hampshire Circuit Court. It is a document about, this is a document that you receive after completing a legal name change. It goes over a few different suggestions.
Is that part of the other exhibit already, or is it something different?
This is something different.
Okay, I don't know if this is the proper witness to raise a question with on that, but
May I approach?
sure. Let him see what you have first, unless he's already seen it.
Sorry, you got it.
I may, just want you to do it here from there. He's asking to identify what that is first.
Yeah, can you identify what's in front of you?
It says Service Center, New Hampshire Circuit Court, information for persons obtaining a name change.
Can you read for me the number 2 on that list?
One second here. Number 2 says you will remain obligated and duty-bound to complete and perform all contractual obligations assumed under your old name, whether those obligations are financial or personal in nature.
Now, when you read that, does that statement mean that my given name doesn't just go away when I get a name change through probate?
It means that anything that you may, to me, that means that if you owe money to someone in the past, that just because you changed your name does not alleviate you from those financial burdens. So that changing name just doesn't prove automatically you're right resident person.
Can you also read number 5 for me as well?
Number 5, you are also under an obligation to change any other records identifying you by your old name. It is your responsibility to notify any and all parties and organizations in custody or in possession of such records of your name change so that any rights or benefits pertaining to such records will not be impaired or lost.
Okay. Now, does that line give a time frame for the alleged obligation to change those other records?
It does not indicate a timeline, but I would certainly think that sooner rather than later would be best.
Do you know of any statutory basis for this alleged obligation to change the records?
I think the statutory regulations would, well, for New Hampshire, as I stated to you that first day I wanted to talk to you, New Hampshire requires you to change your name on your driver's license within 10 days.
Besides that, though, you don't know of any obligation for someone who is changing their name to affect that name change with a credit card company or whatever other names might be on old records.
Honestly, I probably have to look at the statutes in order to clarify. There is a potential that might fall under credit card fraud if you're continue to use a no longer legal name. I don't know, I didn't review that particular statute. I know that you had failed to change your name on your credit card when you obtained your Florida driver's license. That you had, again, when you got your Florida driver's license on March 20th, you did not update your name with them, and you're not updated your name with your credit card company, even though it was almost 5 months after you actually had your name legally changed.
So, but there's no citation there as far as an RSA to require that?
The Florida, I don't recall the Florida laws specifically, I know it is in my report, but Florida law, you would have been required to change your name with them as well.
I mean, but as far as, there's nothing cited there on that document as far as an RSA to, let me know that there's a time frame.
No.
If it were an actual obligation, it says it's an obligation, but if it were an actual obligation, wouldn't that information have been included in the application form rather than after the fact of, I've already changed the name legally, they are now telling me there's an obligation, but if there were an obligation with the contract, wouldn't that have been given up front?
I don't know, I have no idea.
Well, when you enter into an agreement with someone, there's usually terms. You are presented with those terms prior to signing the agreement. So if this was one of the terms, wouldn't it have made sense for it to have been presented up front?
I think most people would presume that you're still required to maintain your prior obligations, even though you might be changing your name.
It's not exactly what I was asking, but I'll move on anyway. If it were an actual obligation, wouldn't there be a time frame listed for completion?
I don't know.
Well, you know that with the New Hampshire statutes of the 10-day, that's a time frame. They give you that. It's pretty clear. When I was made aware of it, I did effect that name change quite quickly, correct?
You did make it quite quickly, but again, it was still some 4 months after you changed your name, so it wasn't within the legal time frame.
Sure, but when you made me aware of that ordinance or that statute in that case, that was when I went ahead and took care of that.
Correct.
So is it possible that I had no reason to believe there was a sense of urgency and so therefore didn't act in a speedy manner on the matter of updating my name in various places?
I don't know. I think I rely on your testimony on that.
But it would be possible.
It's possible.
When you informed me of the obligation to change my name on the license, I completed that within a relatively short period of time. I think you testified to that within the same day, correct?
Yeah, you after I notified you, you had changed your name. I want to say within probably 2 hours.
And I came to see you to inform you of that.
That is correct.
Now, considering you're a person who will take me and put me in handcuffs and take away my freedom for breaking the system's rules, you could see why I responded. You would agree that you created a sense of urgency in me, correct?
I don't know if I created a sense of urgency in you, but I did inform you that you had failed to update your information within the prescribed 10-day period.
Now, when you were interviewing the ladies who were working at the DMV, did you at any point inform me that, do you know if they at any point informed me that filing for a license with my given name was illegal?
I do not know if they did that.
Is it possible that the ladies at the DMV didn't know that that was illegal?
I apologize. If they did not know what was illegal.
That me getting a license under my given name was illegal?
It's possible that they did not know that you had changed your name and they were getting a license under your former name. They may not have realized that you were doing that. It's possible they, I don't know.
Just to be clear, you did talk to them about how I'd gone in on the day of the 7th. You asked, earlier there was some discussion about the 8th, but you know that I'd gone in on the day of the 7th and attempted to get the license under the name Ian Freeman.
I don't know that you went in on the 7th. I know that in conversation you mentioned that you had gone in prior. I don't know exactly when that was. There was not a transaction that was processed on that day.
So your interview with the ladies at the DMV didn't uncover that information?
They were unable to recall when you had specifically been in, other than the transactions that I was that we were able to go back and review.
So if they didn't know that it was illegal for me to get a license under my given name, how would I know that it was illegal?
Well, they know that you're not allowed to. They are aware that it's illegal to get a license in a name that is not. Actually, I would say that they are aware that you're not. I know that the DMV personnel is aware that you're not allowed to take a license in a fake name. Okay? In fact, we regularly get calls from clerks of people that are passing fraudulent documents, attempting to obtain licenses that are fake names. So they are aware that that is illegal. The fact is they may not have realized that your legal name was now changed and that you were actually providing false information to them.
Presuming I did come in as our I think you were here for the testimony of the DMV lady?
Yes.
Presuming I did come in, as was stated on the 7th, with the name Ian Freeman, then they would have known, correct, that I did change my name?
It's possible.
Am I a customer of the DMV?
That's what the DMV refers to the people that come there.
Do you think it's good customer service to handcuff and arrest a customer who made a mistake and was allowed to make that mistake by one of the customer service reps?
Objection, Your Honor, it's not relevant, please.
Not relevant.
So, you are aware from your research that the 7th was the day that the court gave me the paperwork finishing the legal name change process. The 7th was November.
That is correct.
Now, isn't it true that had I come into the DMV on the 6th of November, the day before that paperwork had been completed, that using my birth name to apply for the license on that day would have been completely legal?
Absolutely, what about that?
Doesn't that seem kind of ridiculous to you?
It does seem ridiculous that you came in the very day after changing your name legally and applied it a false name. Yes.
That's not what I meant. What I meant was, doesn't it seem ridiculous that one day it was completely legal and then 2 days later the same act was misdemeanor criminal charge?
Because the name had been legally changed unless you were providing false information. That does not seem ridiculous to me that you provided false information. It seems ridiculous that you didn't provide the correct information one day after changing your name.
Your complaint for unsworn falsification claims I made a written statement which I did not believe to be true. Now, why would I think my birth name, why would I not think that my birth name was still true?
I would say, if we look at this form you submitted earlier, you should continuously use your new name so that there will be no confusion as to your name or identity among the public or within the community of which you are a part. That's number 1 of the form that you gave me about information for persons obtaining a name change.
But number 1 does say should, not must, or you're obligated.
Right. Should means that you should do it.
That sounds like a suggestion to me, doesn't it?
Well, it sounded like a pretty good suggestion to me, probably in the situation that you had.
How do you know what I believe?
I don't think I said what you believed, did I?
Well, your complaint for, I don't have it in front of me, but I can pull it up here. Your complaint for unsworn falsification says that I made a written statement, that I knowingly made a written statement which he did not believe to be true. So, how do you know what I believe?
Because you were given paperwork by the court that had legally changed your name to Ian Freeman, and you wrote Ian Bernard on the application. Thus, that was not your legal name.
That doesn't answer my question.
I think that did answer your question.
That doesn't answer how you knew what I believed about what was true or not.
I think it did. You were providing information by the court that your name had been
If you're not
legally
happy
changed.
with his answer, you can provide additional testimony if you want.
Now, isn't it true that you jumped to a conclusion and you speculated about what I believe?
I don't believe so.
Should arrest for fraud charges be made on speculation and without a complaining party?
You were arrested for fraud. You were arrested for unsworn falsification of prohibitions.
Your complaint for prohibition says I knowingly used a false name. Do you consider your given name false?
It's still my legal name. But I did not get my driver's license in the name Andy, which is what I typically go by.
Is it your opinion that by changing a name legally that the old name is all of a sudden false?
For the purpose of obtaining a driver's license, yes.
What's the definition of a false name?
A false name? Well, in this particular case, it's a name that was not your legal name.
Is that defined anywhere in statutes?
I believe it's actually defined in the SAFC rules,
What's that?
Department of Safety Administrative Rules. Those are available online on NewHampshire.gov.
Given that the Supreme Court in New Hampshire says that using more than one name is legal, so it's not for a fraudulent or criminal purpose, wouldn't that suggest that a false name is only one that's used with criminal intent?
Well, again, the SAFC rules, the Department of Safety rules require you to use your legal name. Therefore, if you're not using your legal name, then you are doing it for illegal purposes.
Is everyone required to read the SF's, whatever rules, those rules you're talking about prior to obtaining the license?
No, but most people typically use the legal name when they get their driver's license.
If what I did was a crime, have you arrested the DMV workers for being accessories to that crime?
No,
Relevance.
Sustained.
That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Any reader?
There's no redirect.
Okay, I just need to ask a question so I'm sure the procedure. If a person obtains a license in their own name, similar to what Mr. Freeman was saying, on November 6th, he would have been okay. If everything that happened on the 8th happened on the 6th, he would have been okay.
that is correct, John.
In New Hampshire, can a person go to a different DMV other than, like I would go to Keene, most people would go to Keene, but can I go to Plymouth, for example, and go to DMV and renew my New Hampshire license even though I live down in this area?
Yes, you may.
So if a person got a license legally in one jurisdiction, the next day changed their name, they could go up to another DMV and apply under their new name, correct?
That is
But
correct.
they have to supply the social security number
Correct.
along with that.
That is correct. I had a similar case like that where unfortunately somebody had two different social security numbers. She was able to get licensed in two different people because of the two social security numbers. They actually tie the social security number to check to make sure you don't have a license in another state or suspended in another jurisdiction. That's why they require the social security license or social security number on your first application.
I just want to make sure I had the procedure right. Based on my question, did you want to ask him anything else?
No problem.
Do you want to ask him anything else based on what I asked? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
There's no further Mr. John to address.
Okay, stay interested in this case. Do you have any witnesses or testimony you want to offer?
I may,
Hang on a second.
Mr. Freeman provided me with this. I don't know if it needs to go to the court.
I can take that back. He has a copy of that.
You want this as an exhibit here for
Yeah,
you?
please.
Okay, why don't you, I only have the one, I've got the 2 pages. I'll make those defendants A and B, okay?
Before we get
Hang on a second, I
to,
gotta mark this. I forget, which one did you offer first? Notice of name change?
yes,
Okay, that'll be defendant's exhibit A. And then B will be this service center information. Okay, do you have any witnesses first?
prior to that, I'd like to address the motion to dismiss
Okay.
at this point. Are you familiar with it, or do I need to?
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with it. Let me just turn it before I get it in front of me. Go ahead.
Do I need to read this into the record?
Make your argument. I mean, the motion itself is in the record. If you want to amplify it, or based on the testimony that you heard, or anything you want to do.
So, is it appropriate to also motion for a directed verdict?
This is the time you can do that, yeah.
I'd like to motion for a directed verdict of not guilty on this and/or to dismiss this case, given that the state has failed to prove the charges here. They allege that I knowingly did these things with criminal intent. And obviously I did, in this court is well aware of my long-term use of both names. That's one of the reasons why I submitted the notice of name change from back in 2010 when I think that was the first time that I'd asked the court to acknowledge Moskowitz versus Moskowitz and acknowledge use Ian Freeman on court paperwork. Your response to that, if I recall correctly, was that you wouldn't order that to be changed on paperwork, but you would do me the courtesy of calling me by the name Mr. Freeman in court. So just bringing that back up. For my purposes, the affidavit of facts here, which I swore to previously, do I need to read these in on the stand? Or
You're in a bit of a bind here. I mean, if you want to testify, if you're going to try to offer facts that haven't already been produced from the witness stand, somebody has to testify to them. They have have to come in through some competent source. So I can't, as I said before, I can't consider facts that haven't been sworn to or affirmed as part of the case. If you want to make legal arguments now as to why you think, or an argument as to why the facts are insufficient at this stage for the case to go any further, you can do that, but you can't add facts that haven't been testified to your argument.
Given that the testimony that has happened thus far, we had the DMV lady, Carolyn, who said she didn't believe that I was using any sort of criminal intent or wrongful purpose, and Detective Player admitted that it was possible that I wasn't doing it for a criminal intent or wrongful purpose. To me, that's reasonable doubt, and so therefore you should dismiss this case. They haven't proven their case.
All right, I think the state began looking at all the evidence in light most favorable to the state. The state has proven the two complaints before the court. First offense, one falsification. It is clear from the evidence and from the testimony, especially the documents in court, that on November 7th, the name change was granted by the probate court. Mr. Freeman has used that name throughout this court for years prior to that. It was officially changed by the court, signed off by Justice McLeod, and Mr. Freeman was aware of that. Then he goes in the next day to the DMV, and it appears to be just out of convenience, or whatever, to avoid a reinstatement fee or not to have to give up his social security number or anything of that nature. Besides, he's going to fill out his paperwork using the name Ian Bernard. There's no question that one day after he's still aware of the probate court's order changing his name. So I think he knew that it wasn't true. That when he was writing down that it was Ian Bernard was his name, his name had been changed, and the prohibitions that it's not a false name, but that maybe his given name. Now the state of New Hampshire recognizes this individual as Ian Freeman. So Ian Bernard is no longer his name through the probate process. So while people may use multiple different names or celebrities or anything of that nature, when it comes to official documents, you have to use the name as your legal name. And on November 7th, this defense legal name became Ian Freeman. So on November 8th, when he went to the DMV and used the Ian Bernard name, he was doing that as a false name. He was doing that to avoid providing information to the state. And I think the evidence is also shown through the Florida license, stuff of that nature. This defendant continued to use both names in an attempt to get a driver's license in Florida, and went back to the Bernard name. So I think it is clear. I think the state has proven this case, and I'd ask that the defense motion be denied.
Actions from expediency, documents, and speculation on the part of the investigator do not prove that I knowingly did anything for a fraudulent purpose.
At this stage, the standard that's applicable is the court has to view the evidence in the light most favorable to the prosecution. And under those circumstances, the prosecution has clearly carried its burden at this stage of the proceedings at least. So I'm going to deny your motion for a directed verdict at this point. And then next question again is, do you have any, first of all, any witnesses who might testify?
No, but I will testify.
I want to testify. Okay, come on. Please raise your right hand. You swear or affirm anything you say you'll be the truth?
I affirm. I will tell the truth.
And your name, please?
I'm Ian Freeman.
Go ahead.
Sure.
Now, I just want to warn you, there have been some allegations here of other potential, we call it misconduct, I don't know, it's not charged, so you're subjecting yourself to questions about other possible issues. You understand that?
Okay.
So, I mean, you have a Fifth Amendment privilege otherwise, but you may open the door. I don't see any urgency on the part of the prosecution to pursue any of those things, but I just wanted to advise you that there's a certain amount of risk.
All right.
All right, why don't you go ahead?
I'd like to read into the record Article 4 of the New Hampshire Constitution, which is the right of conscience is unalienable. Among the natural rights, some are in their very nature unalienable, because no equivalent can be given or received for them of this kind are the rights of conscience. With that in mind, I'd like to just read in the affidavit of facts I submitted to the court previously.
Hang on a second. Okay, it's what you testified to here today. So if you want to read that verbatim, you can certainly do that.
Do you mind if I proceed?
I just want to show, I want to try to get that in front of you. Here, okay. Go ahead.
Okay, I had submitted this previously to the court, saying that Ian H. Bernard and Ian B. Freeman are one and the same for all purposes that I engage in. I do not believe that Ian Bernard is false or fictitious, as it is my given name. I made no statement on or pursuant to any form of the state of New Hampshire which I believe to be untrue, and I never had any purpose to deceive any public servant in the performance of his or her official function. I attempted to acquire the license under the name Ian Freeman at first, but it was denied due to the DMV employees wanting Social Security paperwork I did not have and cannot get. I could acquire the license immediately, or since I could acquire the license immediately under my given name, I chose that route in the interest of efficiency and not fraud. DMV employees were well aware of my name change since I had been in the previous day, November 7th, applying as Ian Freeman. They did accept my application on the 8th with the name Ian Bernard and did not alert me that using my given name would be a problem. I subsequently updated the New Hampshire driver's license to the name Ian Freeman as I told the clerks that I would. So there's that. And just to be clear, I did go into the DMV on the day of receiving the probate court paperwork and attempt to acquire the license under the name Ian Freeman. It was at that time I was informed that I would need certain paperwork from Social Security, and then I determined later that I wouldn't need that paperwork from Social Security if I just got the license in my given name. So that was my motivation for getting the license in the given name. Ultimately, turns out that was a mistake and it was illegal. No one informed me of that, and the ladies at the DMV were certainly aware, since I'd come in the day prior, that I'd already had a legal name change. So they knew that I had a legal name change. I had shown them the probate court paperwork because that was what I needed to show them to get the...
Was this on the 8th or the 7th?
This was on the 7th. So on the 7th, I was given the paperwork by the probate court in the first place I went, given that I was under the threat of suspension, as Andrew had pointed out earlier. I went straight to the DMV, showed them the probate court paperwork, showed them the old Ian Bernard license at that point, and whatever other paperwork I could show them, and they told me I still needed to get that Social Security paperwork as well.
I don't know if you need to refer to it.
No. So they told me I needed to get Social Security paperwork, and that's why I told them I don't want to deal with Social Security. I'm not interested in engaging with any business with them, and so I wanted to figure some other way out. I did some research, discovered that I could get the license under the name Ian Bernard, and then change my name through the New Hampshire DMV to Ian Freeman, and I wouldn't have to get that Social Security paperwork.
Can I ask, what research did you do to get the name on? So you did some research that said you could get it under Ian Bernard.
Well, that was my conclusion. My conclusion was that if I had a license under the name Ian Bernard from New Hampshire, that changing my name after acquiring the license under the name Ian Bernard would not require the Social Security paperwork. So to me, that was an easier thing to accomplish, and that was the motivation there. I subsequently wrote up a piece for freekeen.com about this that I think goes through my perspective on what happened. So I'd like to read that into the record as well, because essentially it's testimony.
Again, this is as testimony.
So I wrote this on April 12th, 2014. This was pretty much right after I was arrested by Andrew there. If you've been reading the Free Keen blog for the last year, you know that in the summer of 2013, the New Hampshire DMV suspended my driving privileges indefinitely until I got a New Hampshire driver's license. You also know that for many years I've been using the name Ian Freeman without going through the probate process to change my name legally, and I'd like to add that the court is also well aware of that. In my interactions with the state and the city, this name change, in fact, has had mixed results. I was able to successfully register to vote as Ian Freeman and run for office under that name, but most courts would not recognize my name change. However, there were a couple of exceptions, including Concord District and Massachusetts' Palmer District courts. However, most rogue men would refuse to recognize it, even though I would cite NH Supreme Court decision Moskowitz versus Moskowitz that makes it pretty clear that one can change one's name in New Hampshire without probate court simply by using the new name. They just ignored the decision. Since I'd been ordered to get a driver's license under the threat of violence, I decided that it would be a good time to do a legal name change. Now, I'd actually tried this a couple of years ago, but was stopped when I was arrested for going to court. That no trespass order for which I was arrested was eventually thrown out by this court, I might add, and the case against me in that case was dismissed. The DMV had told me that my privileges would be suspended as of November 5th. After that, there was a short window of time where if I did get their license, the $100 reinstatement fee would not apply. So that reinstatement fee, just to clarify, had not applied yet at the time at which I did receive the New Hampshire license. So I was in a hurry to get this done. The probate court process was simple and relatively quick for government work, but of course I was paying them $105, and they tend to be more efficient when getting paid.
Just the facts, Mr. Freeman.
I got the official name change document from the probate court on November 7th and went down to the DMV to get the New Hampshire driver's license. I figured I had everything required: old license, voter ID under the name Ian Freeman, and a name change document from probate. But no, turns out there was an unwritten requirement. They wanted me to go get some sort of document of name change from Social Security, an agency with which I want no business. I went home.
Mr. Freeman, I'm just going to tell you, this is testimony, it's not an editorial.
Okay. I'm just trying to read this into the record.
Well, I'll give you the latitude, but I don't want to get too far away from what I have to understand and
I
decide.
gotcha. I went home to do further research and determined that if I changed my name in the DMV system after getting their license and my birth name, that no Social Security document would be required for that. So the next day, I returned to the DMV and turned in my Florida license under the name Ian Bernard and got the New Hampshire DMV temporary license. I had no idea this was a criminal offense, and the DMV ladies never advised me of such. They recognized me from the day previous and were well aware that I had changed my name legally to Ian Freeman, as I had given them the probate document the day prior. I informed them that it was my intention to change my name on the license eventually, but in the interest of time, I wanted to just get the license right away under my Bernard name. I had no reason to believe this would later be considered fraudulent by the state police. So the license was issued, I got the hard copy a couple of months later, and I figured the job was done. I then decided I wanted to run for school board, which I'd done on previous years, under the name Ian Freeman, which again, as I mentioned previously, was the name I had been registered to vote under and had run for office previously. However, I had previously had my voter ID. At some point prior to all this, I had a voter ID with the name Ian Freeman on it. So figuring that it would be easier to get another voter ID quickly than to go through whatever the name change process would be on the license, turns out I was wrong about that, but that's what I thought. I figured it would be more difficult to get a name change on the license than get the voter ID, because I've been through the voter ID process before. I went to the DMV to get another voter ID. They denied me, and since they knew I already had a license, they denied me since they knew I already had a license, even though it was under the name Ian Bernard. Turns out, the school board let me on the ballot after just signing an affidavit, so I didn't need the voter ID after all. But I tried to get another voter ID in Nashua simply out of curiosity. I wanted to see if the DMV workers who didn't know me...
Can I stop you?
Sure.
You said at one point DMV denied you the voter ID,
That's correct.
and then I heard testimony about a trip to Nashua. Is that a separate time for voter ID denial?
A separate time.
Okay.
That was at a later date. So just to jump back a little bit here, they denied me since they knew I already had a license, even though it was under the name Ian Bernard. Turns out the school board let me on the ballot after signing an affidavit, so I didn't ultimately need that voter ID after all. But I tried to get another voter ID in Nashua simply out of curiosity. I wanted to see if the DMV workers who didn't know me would also deny me the voter ID, which I thought I should have a right to have by my understanding of the rules of the system. They also denied me. It was these two attempts that apparently put me on the radar of the state police. About a month later, two state police detectives showed up at my door, led by Sergeant Andrew Player, who claimed to be investigating the denial of my voter IDs, but was also investigating me. Even though I know better than to talk to the police, I did so anyway, as I didn't believe I'd done anything wrong in the ID acquisition process, and was curious as to the questions that they would ask. Of course, as I should know, doing nothing wrong won't prevent one from being arrested. Yesterday, the detective returned with another state police officer to ask a few follow-up questions. He told me that even though I had eventually changed the New Hampshire license to the name Ian Freeman, as I had always intended, that since I had gone through the legal name change prior to applying for the license under the name Ian Bernard, that he had a warrant for my arrest. He charged me with 2 Class A misdemeanors, prohibitions, and unsworn falsification, and I'm facing 2 years in jail over a paperwork snafu. And that's what I get for legally changing my name, apparently. I finally went through the probate process, paid them, and then got kidnapped for my efforts. I had no reason to believe that what I did was illegal, and certainly did not knowingly make false statements. I figured my old name was still good, and in point of fact, and the DMV bureaucrats gave me no reason to believe otherwise. Despite their allegations against me, no one was defrauded, and Ian Bernard is not a fake or fraudulent name. It's my given name. Regardless, I was arrested and bailed at State Police Troop C in Keene, then released on PR. When I asked Andrew Player who the victim was in this case, he answered the people of New Hampshire. Yet when I asked him what the appropriate method to make those supposed victims whole, he didn't really process that, and instead said something about how sentencing is up to the judge. So let's see, you have a paying customer, me, and the public servants reward me for my efforts to use their system that I'm always begged to use by kidnapping me, holding me for ransom, and then threatening me with 2 years in a cage for filing paperwork in the wrong order. And this is ultimately what this case is all about. As was indicated before, had I gone in on November 6th and gotten the driver's license in the name of Ian Bernard, that would have been completely legal. But when I did it on November 8th, it wasn't legal. No one informed me that it wasn't legal. I had no idea that what I was doing was illegal. It wasn't, there was no criminal intent, no fraudulent intent whatsoever, and there never was at any point. Because I believed that the Moskowitz versus Moskowitz decision, which is pretty clear, that you can use whichever name you choose in New Hampshire, as long as it's not for fraudulent, criminal, or wrongful purpose. And I would never defraud anyone. I'm honest in all my dealings, and I know that in my dealings with Andrew Player, when he informed me that there was an obligation to change that name over that 10-day window of time, I got right on that. I have no interest in going to jail for this. This isn't civil disobedience. I mean, this court is certainly well aware of my history of having some civil disobedience in the past, which I actually haven't had since I think I was last on trial here, which was back in 2011. So it's been a number of years for any instances of civil disobedience. This was not civil disobedience. If anything, this was an attempt at doing what the court had suggested, I think, in the past, and that was to go through the probate process. And if anything, this was nothing more than confusion over deadlines and dates and paperwork filings.
Okay.
I didn't knowingly do any of those things for criminal intent. Or fraudulent.
Any questions for Mr. Freeman?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Freeman, now when you showed up on November 7th to the DMV with the probate paperwork, the ladies at the DMV indicated to you that you need more than just the probate paperwork, correct?
I had more than just the probate paperwork on that day. I had some forms of identification, as well as the old Ian Bernard license at that point. What they indicated to me was that I needed to have paperwork from Social Security. That was what I didn't have. I had everything else.
And you just said during your testimony, I think far back at the beginning, that you had indicated you couldn't get the Social Security paperwork. Is that correct?
I have an objection to dealing with Social Security.
But there's a difference between what you could do and what you want to do, correct?
I can't do things that are against my moral code and my beliefs, so I cannot deal with Social Security.
But you'd agree with me, an individual can contact the Social Security Administration, let them know of a name change, and get the information that the DMV needed, correct?
An individual who's not me could do that, but I can't do that.
Is there a reason why you can't do that?
I have no interest in dealing with Social Security.
So you're affirmatively deciding not to go through the name change process with the Social Security Administration?
I don't know anything about their process, and I would prefer not to have any interactions with the Social Security folks. I have an objection to the existence of the federal government and prefer to not deal with them at all.
Now you had indicated that at some time prior to November 5th, the DMV must have contacted you and said, your license is going to go into suspension on November 5th, correct?
Okay, I'm glad you asked about that. In the case of the DMV suspension, there was a lengthy hearing that I had at the DMV just to bring the court up to date on this situation. Gene Killam from the Keene Police Department had charged me criminally with, and I forget the exact statute, but Darrell W. Perry was recently in for the same charge. It has something to do, if I may answer the question.
You gotta answer my question.
Hang on. Yeah.
He asked about the history of the case.
Ask your question again. I'll let you, I mean, if there's an explanation about in answering the question, you can provide your explanation, but you can answer the question first and then provide your explanation.
Can you ask the question again, please?
You had testified earlier that you knew of the DMV suspension that would go effective November 5th, prior to November 5th, correct?
That was if I did not acquire the New Hampshire driver's license, it would go into effect.
But you must have known that sometime, I'm guessing, October 2013, correct?
Yes.
Then on November 5th, if you did not have a valid New Hampshire license, you would go into suspension, correct?
That's correct.
And then you'd have a period of time after that, that if you got it within that period of time, you wouldn't have to pay a $100 reinstatement fee.
Correct. I believe that period of time is 2 weeks.
So any time between when you received that notice in October and November 7th, you could have gone and gotten a license under Ian Bernard, correct?
It's true. And the reason I didn't do that was I figured I'd kill two birds with one stone. I knew the probate paperwork was, that I could do the probate name change and then go and get the license under the name Ian Freeman rather than having to get the license under Ian Bernard and then go through probate, then change it to Ian Freeman. I figured I would do it, again, in the interest of efficiency and expediency.
So you knew then, prior to that you would have to, if you got it before November 5th under Ian Bernard, once the probate process continued, once you were granted November 7th, you'd have to get it changed to license to Ian Freeman. You didn't want to go through those steps, correct?
What I didn't want to do was jump through more hoops than was necessary, and I saw it as I saw going and getting the name change and then getting the New Hampshire license as an easier process. Turns out I should have done it the other way. I should have just gone and gotten the license under the name Ian Bernard, dealt with the probate thing whenever that happened, and then changed it after that. Had I done those things, we wouldn't be sitting here today wasting all of our time. May I explain a little bit further about the November 5th at this point?
No question for you. I'm going to approach you on. You have submitted.
He wants to amplify his answer. Go ahead.
I can make a note and come back to that later if he wants to just continue.
To the defendant's.
Pardon?
The defendant's exhibit.
I'm sorry, I think I left him right.
Mr. Freeman, this is Exhibit B, correct? You submitted that with the court?
That's the service center document that you are given after achieving the name change. The probate court hands that out.
Okay, and they gave this to you in this case, in your case, correct?
On November 7th, I received that document.
Okay. So now, if you've done research on this process, you received that paperwork from the court, why, when you got a driver's license on November 8th, in the name of Ian Bernard, after reading that, it says you had 10 days, after doing the research, you said, why did you wait until Sergeant Player told you in March of 2014 to change your name on your license from Bernard to Freeman?
I did not process that appropriately and did not realize that. It was just being busy. I own a business and I've got a lot on my plate.
Well, you had just told me on record, you didn't want to get the license before the November 5th deadline, wait for the probate order to come out, and then have to change it. So you were aware of it before November 5th, correct?
I was aware of what before November 5th? Can you rephrase that?
That you'd have to change your license once the probate process was finished.
I was not necessarily aware of the time frame on that.
Well, you had just indicated the reason you didn't get it before November 5th was because you didn't want to have to jump through that extra hoop.
What I indicated was that the reason I didn't get it before November 5th was because I figured I'd just do it all at once. Was the intention. And that's what I went in on November 7th for, with the intention to do was to just do it right there, get it all done. That's when I learned I needed this Social Security paperwork, which I had no interest in getting. And that's why I went ahead and just got the license under the name Ian Bernard. Bernard because I figured, I would change it eventually, not realizing the 10-day window of time, which you're right, it is on that paperwork, but again, we all get busy and I did not process that appropriately.
But you went to the Keene DMV sometime before that name change and tried to get a voter ID card, correct?
Before the name change?
Before you did the change in March of 2014, you went...
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And then before that, March 2014 name change, you went to the national DMV to try to get a voter ID card, correct?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
So you had time to go to 2 different DMVs to try to get a voter ID card. Your testimony here today is you didn't have enough time in that span of time from November to March to get your name changed on your license.
I didn't know what that process was like as far as how difficult the name change process would be. And in this case, what was a sense of urgency for me was that I wanted to run for political office and I did not have an ID with my name on it. The school board was telling me at that time I needed to have an ID with the name Ian Freeman on it to run for office. So that was what gave me the sense of urgency to go into the DMV and seek the voter ID. Now, had I known that changing the name on the license would have been so easy, and it turned out that it was very easy. Had I known that, and then I would have just gone through that instead, and again, none of us would probably be here today. Ultimately, this whole case is over a series of, a couple of mistakes that, to me, if you are, a customer of a business and you make a mistake with protocol, the appropriate thing to do with a customer is to say, hey, you went about this the wrong way. We're sorry if we didn't communicate to you what the appropriate way to do this was, but this is the way that you should have done it. And let's just make sure we get this all straightened out. Instead, I get arrested and now charged and face 2 years in jail. That to me is really poor customer service. This was clearly, a mistaken, a confused situation, and anybody would be confused by all of this.
Well, when you went to the Keene DMV to request a voter ID, you never asked them about the process of changing your name, did you?
No, my purpose was to acquire the voter ID.
And when you went to go all the way down to Nashua to ask Nashua...
Point of clarification. I didn't drive down to Nashua. I happened to be in town for business. I was there for the Liberty Forum. I had an hour free. I decided I wanted to go and experiment and see, if one could acquire a voter ID there.
However, you got to, when you went to the Nashua DMV about the voter ID, you never asked the Nashua DMV what the process was to change your name on your license, did you?
Perhaps I should have, but no, I didn't. Again, none of that is a criminal intent at all. This is just confusion over a system that's very obtuse.
I have no further questions.
All right, based on the questions you were asked, did you want to add anything?
Let me review my notes if you don't mind. Yeah, there were a couple of things I wanted to add. It's my right of conscience to use more...
This is based on the questions you were asked. In other words, did the questions you were asked raise any issues that you want to clarify?
I believe this is relevant.
Okay.
It's my right of conscience to use more than one name if I like, and as the New Hampshire Supreme Court has acknowledged, completely legal so long as I don't do it for fraudulent purposes. And that makes sense. While I was aware I needed to change my name to the DMV, I didn't have a sense of urgency about it. I don't believe my birth name to be false or fictitious. I had no intent to defraud or do anything criminal. This court is aware of my civil disobedience, and this was not an act of civil disobedience. I had used the system to get the system to recognize my chosen name, and that was my only intention here. I finally jumped through the hoop of the probate name change, and my reward for that was an arrest. It's terrible customer service, and the New Hampshire State Police should be embarrassed and get back to the job of investigating real cases of fraud.
That's enough. All right, anything else?
Yeah, in short, I did not knowingly do the criminal acts that they say that I've committed. And thank you.
All right, thanks. And just one last time, do you have any other witnesses?
No, I don't.
Okay. All right, I think I understand people's arguments here. I think I'll take it under advisement. I'm going to keep the exhibits for the time being. Does anybody have a need to keep these for any reason? We've got your PO box, right? Mr. Green, mail.
Yeah, did you do
Letter,
this?
street, or PO? Which do we do?
Unless it's urgent, it should go to the mailbox.
Well, how much?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay,
Have a nice day.
Thank you. Anything else?
This guy's gonna have to be in credit scam to get up $100. He probably makes like 65,000 a year and it's all this kind of shit.
Okay.
Like, 100.
All rise, please.
So that's very good job. Your job's a complete waste of time and money.
Yeah, that's okay.
I'd like you guys to drop the charges.
A little late for that.
Oh. So you're not gonna serve this to people that work for it? Does anyone else in here want him to drop the charges?
I did.
We're all victims.
Yeah.
We all live here. Where's the victims that want to help you out?
Just one thing.
Have you ever done that?
Not all of them.
Of course not. No one does.
Isn't there a bit of a conflict of interest here?
You haven't tried a different state. Unrealistic to expect anyone else to do it.
And aren't they costing the state more money?
Had you not taken the job of state police, odds are good you probably wouldn't have read a ticket.
They can't really prosecute.
People are busy. They don't have time. I don't hurt people, I don't defraud people, and that's all that matters. And I don't expect that you do either, so.
Well, good luck to you.
Have a nice day.
All right, good.
Good job, man.
Thanks.
We'd like to invite you to visit freekeen.com. Freekeen.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. Freekeen.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. Freekeen.com.
I should be in Keene, New Hampshire with the Free Staters.